The Hollies are an English rock group known for their pioneering and distinctive three-part vocal harmony style. The Hollies became one of the leading British groups of the 1960s and into the mid-1970s. It was formed by Allan, Clarke and Graham Nash in late 1962 as a Merseybeat-type music group in Manchester, although some of the band members come from towns north of there. Graham Nash left the group in 1968 to form the supergroup Crosby, Stills and Nash. They enjoyed considerable popularity in many countries, although they did not achieve major U.S. chart success until 1966 with Bus Stop. The Hollies had over 30 charting singles on the UK Singles Chart, and 22 on the Billboard Hot 100, with major hits on both sides of the Atlantic that included Just One Look, Look Through Any Window, Bus Stop, I Can't Let Go, On a Carousel, Stop Stop Stop, Carrie Anne, Jennifer Eccles, and later He Ain't Heavy, He's My Brother, Long Cool Woman in a Black Dress, and The Air That I Breathe. They are one of the few British pop groups of the early 1960s that have never officially broken up and continue to record and perform. In recognition of their achievements, the Hollies were inducted to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2010. Formation: the Hollies originated as a duo formed by Allan Clarke and Graham Nash, who were best friends from primary school and began performing together during the skiffle craze of the late 1950s. Eventually Clarke and Nash became a vocal and guitar duo modeled on the Everly Brothers under the names Ricky and Dane Young. Under this name, they teamed up with a local band, the Fortons, consisting of Vic Steele on lead guitar, Eric Haydock on bass guitar, and Don Rathbone on drums. They first called themselves the Hollies for a September 1962 gig at the Oasis Club in Manchester. It has been suggested that Haydock named the group in relation to a Christmas holly garland, though in a 2009 interview, Graham Nash said that the group decided just prior to a performance to call themselves the Hollies, because of their admiration for Buddy Holly. In 2009, Nash wrote, "We called ourselves the Hollies, after Buddy and Christmas." In January 1963, the Hollies performed at the Cavern Club in Liverpool, where they were seen by Parlophone assistant producer Ron Richards, who had been involved in producing the first Beatles session. Richards offered them an audition with Parlophone, but Steele did not want to be a professional musician, and left the band in May 1963. For the audition, they replaced Steele with Tony Hicks, who played in a Nelson band called the Dolphins, which also featured Bobby Elliott on drums and Bernie Calvert on bass. Not only were they signed by Richards, who would continue to produce the band until 1976, and once more in 1979, but a song from the audition, a cover of the Coasters' 1961 single, Ain't That, Just Like Me, was released as their debut single in May 1963, and hit number 25 on the UK Singles Chart. 1960s, their second single, another cover of the Coasters, this time 1957's Searchin', hit number 12. At this point, after recording only 8 songs for Parlophone, Rathbone also decided to leave the band, and Hicks was able to arrange for his Dolphins bandmate Bobby Elliott to replace him as the Hollies' new drummer in August 1963. They then scored their first British top 10 hit in early 1964 with a cover of Maurice Williams and the Zodiac's Stay, which reached number 8 in the UK. It was lifted from the band's Parlophone debut album, Stay with the Hollies, released on January 1, 1964, which went to number 2 on the UK album chart. A version of the album was released in the US as Here I Go Again, on the Hollies' US label of the time, Imperial. The Hollies were known for their bright vocal harmonies. Though initially known for doing cover versions, the band moved towards songs provided to them by such writers as Graham Gouldman. Soon after, the group's in-house songwriting trio of Clarke, Hicks and Nash began providing hits. They followed up with Just One Look, a song that had already had some success in the US for Doris Troy, and the hits continued with Here I Go Again. At this point, there was some North American interest in the group, and versions of Stay with the Hollies, with these 2 singles added, were issued in both Canada by Capitol Records and the US by Imperial Records, with the title changed to Here I Go Again. Like their Parlophone label mates the Beatles, the Hollies albums released in North America would remain very different from their UK counterparts. Although the Hollies singles had only limited impact in North America, their British hits continued with the group's first self-penned hit "We're Through." This was followed by "Yes I Will." And finally the Clint ballad, Junior penned "I'm Alive." As with most British groups during this period, the Hollies' US releases usually featured different track listings from their original UK albums. Their second album, In the Hollies Style, did not chart and none of its tracks were released in the US, although a version was released in Canada with the addition of the British singles. Finally, Look Through Any Window, co-written by future 10cc's member Graham Gouldman, broke the Hollies into the US Top 40 and into the Canadian Top 10, both for the first time. However, If I Needed Someone, the George Harrison song originally recorded by the Beatles on Rubber Soul, charted significantly lower, only reaching number 20 in the UK, and was not released in North America. Their third album, simply called Hollies, hit number 8 in the UK in 1965, but failed to chart in the US under the name Here. Despite its inclusion of Look Through Any Window, and I'm Alive. The Hollies then returned to the UK Top 10 with I Can't Let Go. Their fourth album, Would You Believe?, which included the hit, made it to number 16 in 1966. Released in the US as Beat Group. It also failed to crack the US Top 100. At this point, a dispute between the Hollies and their management broke out over what bassist Eric Haydock contended were excessive fees being charged to the group by management. As a result, Haydock decided to take a leave of absence from the group. While he was gone, the group recorded 2 singles with fill-ins on bass, the Burt Bacharach Hal David song After the Fox, which featured Peter Sellers on vocals, Jack Bruce on electric bass and Burt Bacharach himself on keyboards, and was the theme song from the Sellers film of the same name, and Bus Stop, another Gouldman song, which featured Bernie Calvert, a former bandmate of Hicks and Elliott in the Dolphins, on bass. Bus Stop gave the Hollies their first US Top 10 single. As a result, a US-Canadian Bus Stop album made of the single mixed with unreleased songs from earlier in the band's career climbed to number 75, the group's first US album to enter the Top 100. Although Haydock ultimately proved to be correct about the fee dispute, he was sacked in favor of Calvert after Bus Stop became a huge hit. At the time of Haydock's departure, Clarke, Hicks and Nash participated in the recording of the Everly Brothers' 1966 album Two Yanks in England, which consisted largely of covers of L. Ransford compositions. After the Everly Brothers album, the Hollies stopped publishing original songs under a pseudonym, and from this point until Nash's last single with the Hollies in 1968, all of their single A-sides were original compositions, except the final Nash-era single Listen to Me, which was written by Tony Hazard. In October 1966, the group's fifth album, For Certain Because, became their first album consisting entirely of original compositions by Clarke, Hicks and Nash. Released in the US as Stop! 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 It reached number 91 there and spawned a US release-only single, Pay You Back with Interest, which was a modest hit, peaking at number 28. Another track, Tell Me to My Face, was a moderate hit by Mercury artist Keith, and would also be covered a decade later by Dan Fogelberg and Tim Weisberg on their Twin Sons of Different Mothers album. Meanwhile, the Hollies continued to release a steady stream of international hit singles, Stop 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 from For Certain Because, known for its distinctive banjo arrangement. On a Carousel. Carrie Anne. Their next album Evolution was released on June 1, 1967, the same day as the Beatles' Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. It was also their first album for their new US label Epic. It reached UK number 13 and US number 43. The US version included the single Carrie Anne. In addition, The Searchers and Paul and Barry Ryan each had a minor UK chart hit covering the Evolution song Have You Ever Loved Somebody in 1967. However, Nash's attempt to expand the band's range with a more ambitious composition, King Midas in Reverse, only reached number 18 in the UK charts. The Hollies then released the ambitious, psychedelic album Butterfly, retitled for the US market as King Midas in Reverse Dear Eloise, but it failed to chart. In response, Clarke and Nash wrote an almost bubblegum song Jennifer Eccles, which was a hit. The Hollies donated a Clarke-Nash song, Wings, to No One's Gonna Change Our World, a charity album in aid of the World Wildlife Fund, in 1969. Terry Sylvester replaces Graham Nash. In addition to his Hollies work, in 1967 Graham Nash co-wrote John Walker's first solo hit Annabella and later in 1968, Nash sang on the Scaffold's UK chart topper, Lily the Pink. The failure of King Midas in Reverse had increased tension within the band, with Clarke and Hicks wanting to record more pop material than Nash did. Matters reached a head when the band rejected Nash's Marrakesh Express, and then decided to record an album made up entirely of Bob Dylan covers. Nash did take part in one Dylan cover, Blowin' in the Wind, but made no secret of his disdain for the idea and repeatedly clashed with producer Ron Richards. Nonetheless, Hollies' Sing Dylan sold well in the UK, charting at number 3 in top albums. In August 1968, the Hollies recorded Listen to Me, which featured Nicky Hopkins on piano. That proved to be Nash's last recording session with the Hollies, and he officially left the group shortly thereafter to move to Los Angeles, where he tentatively planned to become primarily a songwriter. Nash told Disc magazine, "I can't take touring anymore. I just want to sit at home and write songs. I don't really care what the rest of the group think." After relocating to Los Angeles, he joined with former Buffalo Springfield guitarist Stephen Stills and ex-Byrds singer David Crosby to form one of the first supergroups, Crosby, Stills and Nash, which released Marrakesh Express as its debut single. The B-side of Listen to Me was Do the Best You Can, the last original recording of a Clarke-Hicks-Nash song to appear on a Hollies record. Graham Nash was replaced in the Hollies by guitarist-singer Terry Sylvester, formerly of both the Escorts, a second-generation Merseybeat group who had a minor UK chart hit in 1964 with Dizzy Miss Lizzy, and the Swinging Blue Jeans from 1966–1968. Sylvester also substituted for Nash as part of the group's songwriting team. As planned before Nash's departure, the group's next album was Hollies' Sing Dylan, which reached the number 3 position on the UK chart while the US version, Words and Music by Bob Dylan, was ignored. Your next album Hollies Sing Hollies did not chart in the UK but did well in Canada and in the USA, charting at number 32. Nash's departure saw the Hollies again turn to outside writers for their single A-sides, but the group's British chart fortunes rallied during 1969 and 1970, and they scored 4 consecutive UK top 20 hits in this period, beginning with the Jeff Stevens-Tony Macaulay song, Sorry Suzanne, which reached number 3 in the UK. The follow-up was the emotional civil rights Euro-themed ballad He Ain't Heavy, He's My Brother, which featured the piano playing of Elton John, and which reached number 3 in the UK in October 1969, number 7 in the US in March 1970. The US version of Hollies Sing Hollies added this song and was retitled He Ain't Heavy, He's My Brother, reaching number 32 on the US album charts. 1970s, the Hollies' next single, I Can't Tell the Bottom from the Top, again featured the young Elton John on piano and reached UK number 7 in May 1970, charting in 12 countries. The UK hits continued with Gasoline Alley Bread, while the Tony Hicks song, Too Young to Be Married merely an album track in the UK and the US became a number 1 single in Australia, New Zealand and Malaysia, also reaching number 9 in Singapore. Alan Clarke's hard-edged rocker, Hey Willie, made number 22 in the UK in 1971, and charted in 8 other countries. Like Graham Nash before him, frontman Alan Clarke by 1971 was growing frustrated, and he too began clashing with producer Ron Richards over material. After seeing Nash's success since departing, he was eager to leave the group and cut a solo album. After the 1971 album Distant Light, which concluded the band's EMI Parlophone contract in the UK, Clarke departed from the Hollies in December, a move which surprised both the band's fans and the public in general. The Hollies signed with Polydor for the UK-Europe in 1972, although their US contract with Epic still had 3 more albums to run. Swedish singer Michael Rickfors, formerly of the group Bamboo, was quickly recruited by the rest of the band and sang lead on the group's first Polydor single The Baby. When Michael first auditioned for them, he tried to sing in Allan Clarke's range and the results were terrible. The rest of the group decided it might be better to record songs with him, starting from scratch. Terry Sylvester and Tony Hicks blended with Michael's voice instead of forcing him to blend with their original harmonies. There were rumors Michael couldn't speak a word of English and had to learn the words of The Baby phonetically. The rumor about him not knowing English was false. However, he did struggle understanding English words that he himself had not put together. Meanwhile, in a counter-programming move, Parlophone lifted a Clarke-composed track from the previously unsuccessful album Distant Light that also featured Clarke on lead vocal and lead guitar. The Creedence Clearwater Revival inspired Long Cool Woman in a Black Dress. Parlophone released this as a rival single to The Baby in February 1972, although it fared relatively poorly in the UK. In the US, Epic, which owned the rights to Distant Light but had not released it, finally released the album in April 1972 and the single in May 1972. Surprisingly, the song became a smash hit outside of Europe, peaking at number 2 in the US and number 1 in Australia. Long Dark Road, another track from Distant Light with vocals by Clarke, distinctive three-part harmonies, and a harmonica throughout, was then also released as a US single, reaching number 26. As a result, Epic pressured Clarke and the Hollies to reform, despite the fact that they had split over a year previously, placing Rick Foss in an awkward position. Meanwhile, the Rick Foss-led Hollies released their first album Romany in October 1972. A second Rick Foss-sung single, Magic Woman Touch, failed to chart in the UK, becoming the band's first official single to miss the UK charts since 1963, although it did chart in 7 other countries, reaching the top 10 in the Netherlands, New Zealand and Hong Kong. A second Rick Foss Hollies album, Out on the Road, was recorded and issued in Germany. However, with the US success of Distant Light and its singles, Clarke decided to rejoin the band the summer of 1973, and Rick Foss then left. Accordingly, no UK or US release was made of Out on the Road, giving this lost Hollies album legendary status among the band's fans and high prices on the original German release. After Clarke's return, the Hollies returned to the UK Top 30 with another swamp rock-style song penned by Clarke, The Day That Curly Billy Shot Down Crazy Sam McGee. In 1974 they scored what was to be their last major new US and UK hit single with the Albert and Mike Hazelwood-composed love song, The Air That I Breathe, which reached number 2 in the UK and Australia and made the top 10 in the US. After the US failure of the Hollies single 4th of July, Asbury Park, written by Bruce Springsteen, Epic gave up on the Hollies in the US, combining their 2 1976 albums into their last US release of the decade, Clarke, Hicks, Sylvester, Calvert, Elliott. The Hollies continued to have singles chart hits during the rest of the 70s, but mostly in Europe and New Zealand. In 1976, for example, the group released 3 singles in 3 different styles, none of which charted in the UK or the US. Star, an up-tempo harmony number reminiscent of their 60s hits, charted only in New Zealand and Australia. The hard rock number Daddy Don't Mind charted only in the Netherlands and Germany, and Wiggle That What's It, an excursion into disco territory, charted only in the Netherlands, Sweden, and New Zealand. Especially popular outside of the US, always very professional in their continuous concert engagements, the Hollies had album chart successes with compilation albums in 1977 and 1978, which kept them going through the late 1970s. 1980s to the present. In 1980, the Hollies returned to the UK charts with the single Soldier's Song, written and produced by Mike Batt, which was a minor hit in 1980 reaching number 58 in the UK. They also released an album of Buddy Holly covers named Buddy Holly which didn't chart in the UK or the US, but did chart in the Netherlands among other places. In 1981, Calvert and Sylvester left the group. In August 1981 the remaining Hollies released Holidays on Emmy, a medley edited together by Tony Hicks from their hit records, which returned them to the UK Top 30. At the request of the BBC, Nash and Haydock briefly rejoined to promote the record on Top of the Pops. The Hollies issued their last Bollider single Take My Love and Run in November 1981, but this failed to chart. Graham Nash joined them for the recording of an Allan song Something Ain't Right on September 10, 1981, which led to a proper reunion album What Goes Around, issued on WEA Records in July 1983. Graham Nash continued appearing with the Hollies through 1983, culminating in the Hollies' last hit in the USA Top 40 with a remake of the Supremes' Stop in the Name of Love, which reached number 29 in 1983. Stop in the Name of Love was taken from the album What Goes Around, which was released in July 1983 and charted in the USA on Billboard Top 200 albums at number 90. A live album featuring the Clarke x Elliott Nash regrouping, Reunion, was recorded at Kings Island Amusement Park in Ohio, during a U.S. tour that followed that same year, finally being issued first in 1997 as Archive Alive, then retitled Reunion in 2004. The Hollies continued to tour and perform through the 1980s, by this time reaching classic rock status and drawing crowds around the world to see them. Allan Coates joined the band on rhythm guitar and high harmony vocals and stayed for more than 20 years. After its use in a TV beer commercial in the summer of 1988, He Ain't Heavy was reissued in the UK and reached number 1, thus establishing a new record for the length of time between chart-topping singles for one artist of 23 years. By this time bassist Ray Stiles, formerly a member of 1970s chart-topping glam rock group Mud, had joined the permanent lineup. Also in 1988 saw the release of compilation album All the Hits and More, the definitive collection which charted in the UK. In 1993 the Hollies had their 30th anniversary as a band. A compilation album, The Air That I Breathe, the very best of the Hollies, charted number 15 in the UK. This album included a new single, The Woman I Love, which charted at number 42 in the UK. Graham Nash again reunited with the Hollies to record a new version of Peggy Sue Got Married that featured lead vocal by Buddy Holly, taken from an alternate version of the song given to Nash by Holly's widow Maria Elena Holly. This Buddy Holly and the Hollies recording opened the Not Fade Away tribute album to Holly by various artists. The Hollies also continued to tour and make TV appearances. The Hollies were awarded an Ivor Novello Award in 1995 for outstanding contribution to British music. After Clarke announced his retirement in February 2000, he was replaced by Carl Wayne, former lead singer of The Move. A New Zealand Hollies Greatest Hits compilation made number 1 in that country in 2001, dislodging the Beatles' One collection from the top spot. While re-establishing the band as a touring attraction over 2000 to mid-2004, Carl Wayne, however, only recorded one song with them, How Do I Survive? The last track on the 2003 Greatest Hits. After Wayne's death from cancer in August 2004, he was replaced by Peter Howarth. By that time Allan Coates left the band and was replaced by Steve Lorry. The Hollies charted at number 21 in the UK in 2003 with compilation album, Greatest Hits from EMI in CD format. The Hollies were inducted into the Vocal Group Hall of Fame in the US in 2006. Also in 2006 the Hollies' first new studio album since 1983, Staying Power, was released by EMI featuring Peter Howarth on lead vocals. The group released a studio album Then, Now, Always in late March 2009, again featuring Peter Howarth on lead vocals. The album was later given an official release by EMI in 2010 with the addition of an extra original song, She'd Kill for Me. In recognition of their achievements, the Hollies were inducted to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2010. In the same year, a compilation album, Midas Touch, the very best of the Hollies, charted in the UK at number 23. In 2012, the Hollies released Hollies Live Hits. We Got the Tunes, a live double CD featuring the Hollies' live performances recorded during the band's 2012 UK tour. 2013, the Hollies' 50th year, was packed with a worldwide 50th anniversary concert tour performing over 60 concerts. As of 2014, the Hollies still tour with two very early, if not original, members, guitarist Tony Hicks and drummer Bobby Elliott. The Hollies in the US, The Hollies were one of the last of the major British invasion groups to have significant chart success in the United States. Their first single was not issued in the US and, although they had a minor US hit in 1964 with Just One Look, it was not until Look Through Any Window that the band reached a US top 40. Many of their early singles that had been major hits in the UK, including Here I Go Again, I'm Alive, Yes I Will, and We're Through, failed to even reach the top 100 in the US. However, from 1966 until after they signed to Epic in 1967, the band had their most concentrated success in the US, including 4 top 10 songs, Long Cool Woman, and The Air That I Breathe. They did, however, have additional US chart hits with the non-UK singles Pay You Back with Interest, Dear Eloise, Long Dark Road, and Stop. In the Name of Love. Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. In 2010, the Hollies were included in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. The band members inducted were Allan Clarke, Tony Hicks, Graham Nash, Eric Haydock, Bobby Elliott, Bernie Culvert and Terry Sylvester. It was announced that the band would be reuniting with Graham Nash and Allan Clarke for a live performance at the induction ceremony. However, the current incarnation of the band was unable to reschedule a performance in London to attend. The Hollies were represented at the RRHOF ceremony by Clarke, Nash, Sylvester, Haydock and Culvert. 60 years after first singing together, Allan Clarke and Graham Nash gave a reunion performance consisting of Bus Stop, Carrie Anne, and Long Cool Woman. Band members, see List of the Hollies members. Current members, Tony Hicks Euro guitars, backing vocals, banjo, mandolin, bass, sitar, keyboards, Bobby Elliott Euro drums, Ray Styles Euro bass, backing vocals, Ian Parker Euro keyboards, woodwinds, backing vocals, Peter Howarth Euro lead vocals, guitar, Steve Laurie Euro guitar, backing vocals. Discography, see the Hollies discography. References. External links, official band site, The Legends of the 60s, Scandinavian Hollies site, Rock and Roll Biographies The Hollies. Retrieved August 31, 2006, from Classic Band's website, The Hollies interviewed on the Pop Chronicles.